In this lesson, we'll discuss some of the more common methods for measuring fire effects that you will perform as a fire effects monitor or field observer. For each technique, we'll provide a definition, discuss what the measurement is used for, and which management objectives it can relate to, and briefly describe how the measurement is performed. This slide lists some fire effects that are measured to determine whether management objectives have been met. The measurements covered in this lesson are based on the Fire Effects Monitor and Field Observer Position Taskbook and are some of the most common methods of measuring fire effects. In the course of your work, you will encounter many other ways of measuring fire effects, and in Lesson 3 of this unit, we'll discuss sources you can use to find information about other measurements you might be asked to document. The first measurement we'll cover is fuel loading. Fuel loading is defined as the amount of fuel present on a site expressed quantitatively in terms of weight of fuel per unit area. This may be available fuel, consumable fuel, or total fuel, and is usually measured in dry weight. Although fuel loading is not really a fire effect, measurements of fuel loading are important in predicting fire behavior, and management objectives often use reduction in fuel loading as a criterion. An example of a management objective based on fuel loading would be use prescribed fire to reduce the 1-hour fuel loading by 60 to 80% immediately post-fire. In order to determine whether the objective was met, a measurement of fuel loading both before and after the prescribed burn is required. The type and amount of fuels inventoried should match the objective for conducting the inventory because fuels data can be expensive and time-consuming to collect. In other words, if the objective relates only to 1-hour fuels, it may not be necessary to collect data on the other fuel size classes. One of the most common protocols for measuring fuel loading quantitatively was developed by James Brown of the U.S. Forest Service and his colleagues. These methods are detailed in the 1982 publication, Handbook for Inventorying Surface Fuels and Biomass in the Interior West. This publication provides a comprehensive protocol for inventorying downed woody material, forest floor litter and duff, herbaceous vegetation, shrubs, and small conifers. Field sampling methods using Brown's transects include counting and measuring diameters of downed woody pieces that intersect vertical sampling planes, comparing quantities of litter and herbaceous vegetation, tallying conifers by height classes, and measuring duff depth. All of these procedures can be completed at one sample point in about 15 minutes. Multiple sampling points may be required to obtain the desired level of accuracy. Several computer software applications are available for calculating fuel weights from these inventory data. These methods can be applied most accurately in the Interior West. For areas outside the Interior West, other techniques for estimating biomass of large trees, herbaceous vegetation, litter, and downed woody material are listed in the Brown publication. This reference is an important document for your Fire Effects library. It's available electronically at the address shown on this slide. Another way to quantitatively estimate fuel loading uses a photo series developed for a specific fuel type in a defined geographic area. The stand of interest is compared to pictures of similar stands in which fuel inventories have been conducted. Each group of photos in a series includes inventory information summarizing vegetation composition, structure, fuel loading by size class, and forest floor depth and loading. Published photo guides are currently available for 40 forest and shrubland vegetation types in the U.S. A comprehensive website at the address shown on this slide provides access to all published and unpublished photo series with useful search features and options to customize photo series for specific sites. Here's an example of a page from a photo series. Each photo in the series consists of a site's photograph and the fuel loading data associated with the conditions in that specific photograph. Fire managers can then use the photographs, often interpolating between more than one, to visually estimate their site's fuel loading and thus potential fire behavior. The photo series method is quicker and often easier than field sampling, but accuracy is highly variable and dependent on the user's experience. We'll next look at consumption. Consumption is the amount of a specified fuel type, or strata, that is removed through the fire process. Consumption is typically expressed quantitatively in terms of a percentage or amount of the specified fuel removed. For example, objectives may be to consume 40 to 60% of the 1,000-hour fuels, or reduce the duff layer to an average of 3 to 4 inches. As mentioned, The consumption of fuel is measured by comparing the pre-treatment fuel loading to that of the post-treatment. This can be documented through the use of fuel loading inventories, Brown's transects, photoseries comparisons, or simple before and after photographs taken from the same vantage point if quantitative measurements are not required. One type of measurement of the consumption of the duff layer is depth of burn. Depth of burn is a specific quantitative measurement of the reduction in forest floor thickness due to consumption by fire, usually measured in inches or centimeters by comparing the pre-fire depth of the duff and litter layer to that of the post-fire. Surveyor pins or bridge spikes can be used as an easy and practical way to monitor consumption of duff, litter, and organic soils. The pins or spikes are pounded into the ground before the fire with the crosspiece or top of the spike level with the top of the litter layer. After the fire, the amount of pin exposed serves as a measure of the depth of organic material removed. Use of an inexpensive metal detector can make it much easier to relocate metal pins after the fire. Creation of planting sites is a common management goal for prescribed fire that relates to duff and litter consumption. A treatment objective might be to expose 20 to 40% bare mineral soil for the creation of planting sites. Achievement of this objective can be measured by visual estimation or by photo documenting the overall percentage of bare mineral soil exposed by the fire treatment. Now we'll turn to burn pattern. The burn pattern is the mosaic of burned and unburned vegetation and fuels. It can be further defined in terms of the degree of heating and consumption of fuels and vegetation, such as scorched compared to severely burned areas. Fire effects vary considerably with burn pattern because it reflects the variation in the fire's heat regime above, at, and below the surface. Burn patterns can be influenced by many factors, including topography, wind direction, and type and quantity of fuel. And in prescribed fire, the burn pattern is also influenced by the ignition pattern. A burn pattern can occur in the tree canopy, shrub canopy, in surface fuels, or in litter, duff, and organic layers. The size of the mosaic can vary from acres of scorched, consumed, and unburned patches in the canopy to mosaic patterns of burned and unburned fuels in the litter layers of only a few feet, or even inches. Mosaics of fire severity across a landscape may be beneficial to some species of wildlife and can also support management goals to limit the extent of future wildfires. So management objectives often call for creating a mosaic burn pattern across a broad area. To evaluate whether the objectives have been met, a map or diagram of the burn pattern can be the best tool. A hand-drawn map of the burned area can show areas where the tree or shrub canopy was removed, areas where the fire was an underburn, and areas where the fire did not burn at all. Information on burn pattern can also be obtained through photography. A low-elevation aerial photo or an oblique photo taken from a high vantage point, such as a hilltop or other clear vantage point, can be used to document burn pattern. For some management objectives, a more detailed description of burn pattern and fire severity is required. Recall from Lesson 1 that burn severity is a qualitative assessment of the heat pulse directed toward the ground during a fire. It relates to soil heating, large fuel and duff consumption, consumption of the litter and organic layer, and mortality of buried plant parts. Burn severity assessment is useful as an exceptionally good predictor of fire effects on vegetation. It indirectly measures the heat pulse below the surface and provides an indicator of the fire's impacts on buried plant parts. Assessments of burn severity allow managers to broadly predict fire effects on the habitat type from changes in the organic substrate to the survival of its plants. It is also one of the most important fire effects measurements for determining post-fire rehabilitation needs. The pattern of burn severity on the surface of the ground varies with the distribution of pre-fire fuel loading and arrangement, thickness of litter and duff layers, and moisture content of surface and ground fuels. Burn severity can be described in terms of percent area of a plot or can be related to specific inventory points. The important points in measuring burn severity are to understand which components of the surface and subsurface layers you will be evaluating, and which criteria will be used to classify the impact of fire on these components. This can vary from assignment to assignment. In Lesson 3, we'll go over an example of a burn severity assessment protocol with detailed descriptions of classification criteria. Next, we'll discuss documenting plant mortality. Recall from Lesson 1 of this unit that plant mortality can be either a first-order, immediate fire effect, or a second-order, delayed fire effect. Fire line intensity, burn severity, total duration of combustion, soil heating, time of the year, and time since the last fire all influence mortality or survival of plants. Post-fire effects also depend upon the characteristics of the plant species on the site, including their ability to resist heat of a fire and the mechanisms by which they recover after fire. Plant mortality depends on percentage of tissue killed, location of dead tissue, reproductive mechanisms, and the species' ability to recover from injury. Mortality can be immediate and obvious in non-sprouting plants when all above-ground plant tissue has been consumed or heavily charred, but delayed mortality may not be evident for weeks, months, or even years after the fire. Delayed mortality can be predicted in some tree species through observations of crown scorch and bole char. Crown scorch is the browning of needles or leaves in the crown of a tree or shrub caused by heat from a fire. Scorching indicates that the leaf tissue has been lethally heated. Maximum scorch height is measured from ground level to the highest point in the crown where leaf death is evident. Average scorch height is calculated from the maximum scorch heights. It may be useful to produce a graph of scorch heights to show the variation around the average. Managers may want to correlate scorch height with the pre-burn locations of large dead and downed fuels. These correlations usually require photographs or maps of fuel pockets. In some species, the percent of crown scorched is a more reliable predictor of lethal damage than crown scorch height. For percent crown scorched, estimate the percent of the entire crown that is scorched for each overstory tree. Average percent crown scorched may be calculated, but percent crown scorched is a better indicator of individual tree mortality. Char height is the maximum height of charred bark on each overstory tree. Note that the maximum height is measured even if the char is patchy. For thinner bark tree species, char height, or percentage of char circumference, can be a reliable indicator of post-fire mortality. Top kill refers to a specific kind of plant mortality in sprouting plants where all above-ground plant tissue, foliage and stem tissue, is destroyed by the fire, but the roots of the plant survive and are able to produce new stems and leaves. Amount of top kill desired is a common management objective for shrub and grass vegetation types, where new top growth is desired to replace decadent stands that are less productive or less palatable to livestock and wildlife. So, we've covered some of the more common measurements of fire's effects on vegetation, but fire affects other aspects of ecosystems and society as well. As part of their fire assignment, fire effects monitors and field observers may also be assigned to document fire effects on other resources such as water, air, and even structures and personal property. Although fire effects on water quality are almost always second-order fire effects, many wildfires have management objectives or requirements relating to water quality, such as protecting municipal watersheds or aquatic habitats. You may be assigned to document first-order fire effects, such as burn severity and loss of vegetation, that lead to second-order impacts on water quality, and an understanding of water quality concerns will help you focus on documenting the appropriate first-order effects. Water quality refers to the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics of water in reference to a particular use. Among the physical characteristics of concern to hydrologists and watershed managers are sediment concentrations, turbidity, water temperature, and introduction of fire retardant chemicals. Watersheds that have been severely denuded by wildfire are often vulnerable to accelerated rates of soil erosion and therefore can yield large amounts of post-fire sediment. Higher sedimentation can result in increased turbidity and can adversely affect the quality of water for wildlife and for human, agriculture, and industrial purposes. High-severity fires in some ecosystems, such as chaparral shrublands, can cause the formation of water-repellent layers in the soil, sometimes referred to as hydrophobic soils or hydrophobicity. Water-repellent soils do not allow precipitation to penetrate down into the soil, and therefore can further increase erosion and sedimentation. Documenting the occurrence and degree of water repellency in post-fire soils is a highly technical process, but the proper documentation of burn severity, type of vegetation burned, and topography by fire effects monitors and field observers can assist soil scientists and hydrologists in determining the need for post-fire evaluation. Water temperature is a critical water quality characteristic of many streams and aquatic habitats. Temperature controls the survival of certain plants and animals in the water that are sensitive to water temperature. When streamside vegetation is removed by fire, the stream surface is exposed to direct solar radiation, and stream temperatures rise. Temperature increases of 18 degrees Fahrenheit have been documented following wildfires. Some aquatic species are affected by changes of even a few degrees in water temperature. Many fires have a management requirement to avoid the application of aerial retardant within a specified distance of waterways to prevent undesired effects on aquatic life and municipal water supplies. If chemical retardants accidentally enter a waterway, formal documentation and notifications are usually required. Fire effects monitors and field observers can provide the preliminary photo documentation of the incident and its immediate effects, and ensure that their direct ICS supervisor is notified. The last fire effect we'll consider here is property damage. Nearly all wildland fires have a management objective to prevent property damage. You may be requested to document structure and other property damage due to wildfire. Photographs, including the location, date, and time, are a common method of documenting. Including a photograph with features that positively identify the damaged property, such as a street address number or license plate number, is helpful, particularly if the damage is extensive and other identifying features have been destroyed. In summary, various methods are available for measuring and documenting fire effects. We've covered some of the most common in this lesson. In determining which fire effects to monitor and how to document these effects, remember that the selection of fire effects to observe and document should be tied to the fire's management objectives. And because terminology and procedures for documenting fire effects can vary, always clarify your instructions for collecting data and observations. Next are a few comprehension check questions. Again, these questions are not graded. Select an answer for the question and click Submit to check your answer. Click Next to move to the next question, or Previous to review or redo a question. When you've finished answering the questions, please proceed to Lesson 3 of this unit, which discusses in greater detail some of the specific protocols for measuring and documenting fire effects.